but he talks in practicality. So it's really important that you pay attention. Tonight, we're talking about an interesting topic. We're talking about being culturally competent. And when you're culturally competent, it means that you understand, truly understand the norms of other cultures, that you understand how things work in that culture, because every culture is different. And even if you move from a large city to a small city, there's a cultural change. Or if you move from one state to another, there's a cultural change. And I want to start this by sharing a story with you that is true. I have a friend who had worked with TKK for years. And she always found it odd that when she started the year, she would ask the kids a question that she was sure they knew the answer to, and it was just crickets. And so she'd had several assistants, and she'd asked them about it, and they all said, well, they didn't know why. And so then one year she had a new assistant, and she said, I don't understand why these kids don't answer. She said, because I know they know the answer. And the assistant said, so they're thinking that they don't know what it is you want from them because they know that you know the answer. And so why are you asking them? And she said that that was such a surprise to her. She'd never considered that they weren't answering because they knew she already knew the answer. And so she said, I learned so much that year from this assistant that she had, who was absolutely of the culture, right? And was able to share with her. And she said that that was one of the turning points in her work with TKK. And she said it made all the difference in the world in understanding culturally. They weren't used to being asked questions that people already knew the answer to. So just to be aware that it can be something that simple, right? And so we really want to be, in order to be culturally competent, we really have to go out of our way and maybe out of our own comfort zone to learn how other people see the world and how they interact with it so that we can at least have an understanding of what's going on in their heads. So Coach, I don't know if you want to say anything about this at this point, but I'll put it to you before we get a question.
Well, in a similar fashion, when I was, real early in the teaching my first year, I was kind of reprimanding the kid, and she wasn't looking at me in my face. She was kind of looking down, and it was a little black girl, and I said, "Hey, look at me when I'm talking to you," and because I didn't know, right, that was a cultural thing. That if you looked at, let's say, your dad or your grandpa square in the eyes, that was actually a sign of disrespect. So I had a teacher pull me to the side and say, "Hey, here's the situation." And I was like, "Oh, crud." So I had to go and apologize to that little girl. I didn't know. So, a lot of times we're just not aware of what we're not aware of. And that was news to me. I had no idea about that. And I had a lot of black friends growing up, even in the 60s and early 70s. And that never came up, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, right? And I think that we have to respect different cultures, and it's partly also because of their situation. So for instance, if you live in a place that's very crowded and that's what your comfort zone is, if you're a person who's used to, like me, that has 3,000 square feet and thinks it's not enough just for me, that's different, because for me, I feel like you're in my face if I can touch you, and they feel like that's they're not invading space at all. So I think we just need to realize that people are usually uh, responding and acting in a way that's what they were taught, and we have to value the fact that all cultures are different. If they were all alike, that'd be pretty boring. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit tonight about cultural competence and understanding that it's really about making the effort to ask the questions and find out what other cultures think, believe, ways they interact, and so forth.
Well, and before we go on to the questions, that brought up something else, twofold, two touch points. One, when we were in Hawaii, and I don't think you were there with us. I think you were there with us in Alaska. But anyway, when we went to Hawaii, I believe it. I can't remember if it was a big Chinese population or Filipino. I can't remember, but they wouldn't move out of the way when you're walking, and they would walk in clumps and in groups. And then on top of that, that was the first time I experienced the intersections where they go across too, right? It wasn't just like the four corners. And so I'm moving, I'm ducking, I'm doing all this, and I finally go, okay, that's it. I'm not moving either, and I was just bowling people over. And then the other one is on my daily walk. You get to the right hand side, right? We're not in England where it's on the other side. So you get on the right hand side, and people are just walking right at you. Or when they're walking, two at a spot. I always taught my kids and my wife or whatever, get behind them, get out of the way. In other words, and then when they pass, you can go through. So I always find that funny because you're like, you're dodging and ducking and diving and everything else, and and you're like, in the same breath, you're like, hey, follow the rules, man. you know,
And they are their own,
yeah,
right? I
exactly.
mean, right? It's not that they aren't following their rules, it's that they're not following yours. And I think that that's we have to realize that, right?
Yeah,
And there are places where multiple different cultures have come together and they've worked through that. There's an island off the coast in Africa where it's been taken over numerous times by different colonial populations. And now they're all there at once. And so, but they talk about the fact that they have learned because they're semi-isolated, right? They've learned that each one of them is important and necessary. And they have multiple religions and they all get along and they all share space. But it takes a lot and it has to be your goal. So I just think it's important for us to understand that culture matters. You might not think it does, but it does. It matters a lot. And your individual culture in your family matters, and then your culture in your ethnicity or your grouping matters, right? And it just keeps going from there. So, are you ready for us to get a question, Mr. Coach? All right.
yeah.
So, Robert,
All, all right.
your
All right, awesome. The first question is, what is cultural competency? Sorry, and why is it important? That word is hard for me to pronounce.
so competency. So I think we were talking about that to a great deal. If you're going to live in so one of the things that we know is that we are citizens of the world. We used to think we were just citizens of small populations, and when you lived with horse and buggy days, that was true. Wherever you lived, you couldn't go very far. But now you can get to China in 13 hours, right? You can get to England in 13 hours. You can tour in Russia. You can go to South Africa. You can go on a safari. You can do all these things. You can go around and visit the places in South America or Australia. So we're citizens of the world. And if we don't learn to be culturally competent and understand that each group of people has their own cultural norms and values and things that they hold dear, we're going to miss out on a lot because it's learning about different cultures and going, oh, and even if you can't physically travel to lots of different places, there are all kinds of virtual tours you can take and get used to seeing other cultures and how they interact with one another. So I think as citizens of the world, if nothing else, if it has nothing to do with the children you work with, but it does. But if you're as a citizen of the world, you need to be aware of cultural norms and differences and value those differences. So, Coach, how about you?
Well, even just not cultural, but so we weren't big huggers and touchers in our family, right? We would give bumps or different things, but hugging, that just wasn't our thing. Well, when I went over, I've been with my wife since I was 15. She was my girlfriend, and we've been married. Dude, they're all hugging on me, and I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, get off me, right? Like, and or I wasn't a big veggie guy, and they had a salad before every dinner, and I've been over there 50 million times now. over the last 47 years. But I think, not only is it just cultural, but anything that's different. And we have to at least be aware of that, right? That's step one. Hi, I'm Brett. I'm an alcoholic. Be aware of what's going on first, so then we can proceed accordingly. And I always say, hey, when in Rome, do as the Romans, right? Like when I go over to my father-in-law's house, it's his rules, right? It's just the way it is. And whether I like it or I dislike it or anywhere in between, that's where it's at. Or if I go to somebody else's, house, you don't have to take your shoes off in my house, but at somebody else's house, that's how you have to do it to enter their house. And it's always funny when somebody will come over here like, do I need to take off my shoes? I'm like, I don't know. Do your feet hurt? Do your right? Like they're like, no, that's what my mom used to do. So, and I like to call it like trash traditions versus curated convictions. And so, why do we do what we do, right? And we always go back to the touch point of the little girl who walks up to her mom. Why are they cutting off the back part of the hand? Like, I don't know. Go ahead and ask your grandma. Well, I don't know. Go ask your great grandma. And about three up, the great great grandma or whatever says, I'm not sure why those knuckleheads are doing that. Seems like a waste. But I know my pen was just too short. So I think a lot of times what we do is we have trash traditions, not curated convictions based off of our own belief system and different things of that nature, right? And so in certain places, certain things that you may do culturally that make sense, it may not make sense in another culture or classroom. And that's what I love about middle school because, you're going to 7 different classrooms. And when my kids, my personal kids would come and say, well, my first grade, or my first period teacher is a jerk, I'd say, good. They go, what do you mean? I go, well, I don't know. Do you think you're going to have to deal with jerks in this world? Well, yeah. I said, great. I go, what about your 7th period? Oh, they're sweet and great. I go, do you think you're going to have to deal with sweet people? Well, now you're knowing how to deal with all of these differences, whether it's cultural or otherwise.
Thank you for sharing that. I do want to just share this. When you say, when in Rome, do as Romans, one of the things that's interesting when you're in Rome is that speed limits and parking spaces are merely suggestions. They are not rules. And for Americans who are used to parking spaces being this and this is how you park and all of that, it can be very well, you're thinking, what the heck is going on, right? Because it's truly in Rome, it's a suggestion, not a reality.
And
All
I
right, so
want to
that's an
add
aside.
to
Oh,
I want to add to what you were saying earlier, Gma, too. Cultural competence. I mean, that's where we're at, right? I mean, you could go in your own grocery store and there's 7, 10, 15 different cultures just within, the walls
mhm.
of that. And we need to be open to that, just like running a parallel with AI. If you don't get on board with AI at some level, you're going to get left behind. And so I think that understanding that we just live in a much different world, as you said earlier, I think is critically important. I want to run that AI, parallel, so to speak.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, Robert, you're up.
All right, the next question is, how can I teach youth to appreciate cultural diversity?
If you're going to teach young people to appreciate cultural difference, you better appreciate it yourself because kids aren't listening to what you say. They're listening, or they might hear that, but they're going to be watching your behavior. And what you do will speak 1,000 times louder to them than anything you say. And that's why when we talk about social emotional learning, right? And people say, well, we want the kids to learn that, but then they treat kids without respect or without understanding. The kid isn't hearing your speech on social emotional learning. They're watching your behavior. And so I think that that's true with anything. And children do not, over time, we teach children to filter out gut feelings, right? And by the time you're an adult, we've pretty much tried to condition you out of that. And kids just they just see what they see, they hear what they hear, but they are watchful. And that's why if you've ever gone in and you've gotten a haircut, every kid notices that you have that because they're watching you. Or do you like so and so because I saw you talking to them? So I think that the very best thing you can do is demonstrate that you value cultural differences. And then when you have celebrations, right, for different cultural traditions, and really celebrate them, and then they can decide how they feel about it. But you need to really celebrate and understand. But you got to walk the talk. So,
Yeah,
Coach.
that's a mic drop right there, right? I don't really need to say anything, but it got me thinking of several things, so I'll try to go fast. So mic drop, boom, she just dropped the mic, and I say be a walking sermon versus a talking sermon, right? Nobody cares. I tell my personal kids, because I count everybody as my kids, right? Everybody, if you're 50 years old and I'm mentoring you, you're a kid, right? Whatever. But I used to tell them, look, 90% of the time, do as I do, and 10% of the time I haven't figured it out yet, so do as I say, right? One of
Right.
those types of things. Secondly, when you were talking about that gut feeling, Malcolm Gladwell's made a pretty good living on writing several books, but one of them is Blink, right? In a blink of an eye, we know stuff. And one of the things he talked about was the statue that was worth a whole bunch of money and all this, and they got to study it before the auction for weeks. And everybody knew that thing was fake, but they bid on it like it was real. And then they wound up, messing up. So, I always tell people, in a blink of an eye, you kind of know and go with that gut. And even if it's wrong sometimes, it's going to be right a lot more than it is going to be wrong. The other thing I put here is, it takes a village and coming together as one. So you should be appreciative of every different type of culture, every different type of gender, every different type of everything that's different. That's why I love to sit in a room and say, here's the objective. And then people come up with stuff I would have never thought of. And I don't care if you're 3 or you're 73, the best idea in the room, the cream rises to the top, so to speak. And then the last thing I want to say about that, if you ever get confused about cultural diversity and how to appreciate it, just go drive and park in front of an elementary and watch them at recess and watch them play sports, because you'll see every culture, every religion, everything coming together as one on the basketball court or volleyball or whatever they're doing. And we don't even see that in churches anymore. They have the Korean church, they have the black church, they have the blah blah church. But if you go out onto an elementary playground, I try to do that every now and then just to remember this is really what it's about, because it's an eclectic melting pot.
And I don't know if you remember them. It was probably before you were born. There was a movie called South Pacific. And in that, it's a World War II setup. And there's a song in there that's called You Have to Be Carefully Taught. And what it says is that you have to be taught to hate all the people your relatives hate, to hate all the things your relatives hate. And you're taught that. And you're taught that by the way people behave. And I think that if you were taught to be resentful, or you were taught that some culture does not have value, or that difference doesn't have value, you need to try and figure out what it was you were taught and how you might want to correct that. But it's true, we are taught by just behaviors, not so much by words. And that's why it's so difficult sometimes to uncover, because it's not a lesson that somebody went step one, step two, step three. You just watch these behaviors over 15 years, and so you soak them in. So
Trash traditions, right? But
absolutely.
but we also get good stuff, right? I mean,
Yep.
I think I'm a pretty good guy, but it's only because I got to watch my mom.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's you have to realize that you're not the only ship in the ocean, right? And there are ships better that have better ideas, and their culture does things that are better. And adapt that. I don't, a lot of times we talk about food and things like that. Uh, yeah, there's a whole lot of different foods that I am so grateful I've been exposed to since my childhood, right? Because in my childhood, it was very traditional, right? Types of food, and I've learned to enjoy that a lot more. So, uh, I love the term "be a walking sermon, not a talking one."
Yeah.
So, Robert, that's what we think.
Awesome. Our next question is, what activities foster cross cultural understanding?
So, I personally love it if you can get parents to come in and volunteer. So, I will tell you that Mexican food is one of my favorites. And I learned how to do that because I had a kid in my room whose mother would come in 3 times a year and cook with my class. And I learned from her. She was invaluable to me on how to do certain things. And I can remember her asking me one time to do the refried beans. And she said, "So what you need to do is, be sure that the beans are clean, bring the water to a boil so that the beans won't turn dark. And when it's boiling, then put the beans in." That is exactly what I did. And when I got there, she tasted them and she said, "Okay." She said, "Did you put bacon in?" "No." "Did you put onions in?" "No." "Did you put salt in?" "No." "Did you put pepper?" "No." I didn't do anything. I did exactly what she told me. And she said, "Okay, so let's go back through this," right? So I learned from her she allowed me to make mistakes, right? But I learned because she helped me correct that. And I have a real sense of what's authentic and what's not because of her. And I appreciate that more than you can imagine. And so I think that you can do food celebrations, right? And if you can get moms or dads, either one, or older brothers and sisters, whoever can put that cuisine together and do it from all different heritages. And the idea is that you can't say you don't like it until you try it, right? You can't say I don't like broccoli till you've eaten broccoli. So everybody gets a taste test, right, of that so that they can try it out. And then they can talk about how it's different and how it's not what they're used to. And so I think that that's important. And then why is it important to you? Or holidays or special days, right? Everybody doesn't have to celebrate the same special day, right? Look at different holidays, different cultural traditions, and use those as a focal point and talk about how you can appreciate those differences and then demonstrate it. So, Coach, to you.
Well, unless it's lima beans, nobody needs to taste those. They just know that they're disgustingly gross. My dad made me eat lima beans, and I threw up on his shoe. So, unless it's lima beans, you do not have to do that. I was thinking about when you were talking, right? It's the pebble and the water effect. And I'll give you two touch points on that. The first one you already gave. So Rachel was able to teach you, and you're able to teach, my wife and pass that on, right? And to me, that's the greatest part about learning and teaching and being a child champion, no matter at what level. She didn't know she was being a child champion, but she was, right? She was teaching the child of GMA, but she was also teaching these kids how to be able to do that and to be able to make tortillas and beans from scratch. Just a different animal, right? It just tastes better once you get accustomed to it at first because they put all the preservatives in the beans. It's like weird, right? Tasting, but once you figure out like what's truly authentic and good, it's different. And I would just say that we used to do in my special day class, we would just do a monthly theme or a weekly theme even. And so we would pick a country, and then we would have 7 or 10 different things that we would do. We would try to get, somebody to come in, and that was, part of that culture and talk to the kids. We would do. I remember that the favorite part for them was to color the flags, right? And then to look back in the day, we had encyclopedias, just so we're all clear. We didn't have Google and whatnot. And they were able to look and they were able to see the flag and what did it mean and what were all the symbols and whatever. And to me, that was cool for me too. And then we were able to write a little summary in the report. And, we could go through the encyclopedia and those top 7 or 10 points we were able to write down. Then we were able to have them share out. Or when they come into the room, we would say, okay, how do we say hi or hello in that language? And I'd butcher it because I'm a knucklehead, but I got a little slang to me, so I would butcher everything, but I would still try to do it and whatever. We'd laugh and giggle and all that kind of stuff. So to me, if you have a monthly or a weekly theme, and then there's a lot of stuff that you can do underneath that to foster that cross-cultural understanding.
Absolutely. And the arts are a great place to look at that too, right? Dance, drama, music, uh, all of that is really key, I think, to investigating, because some of the dances are amazing, right? Or the artwork, when you look at them and you go, wow, the colors are so vibrant, right? Whereas others are so subdued. So I think to take a look at the arts is also a really good way to help kids value other cultures,
And
right?
isn't there like a whole cartoon on that, Dora the Explorer? Isn't that's what she does, is go to all these different. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever watched it officially, but I think that's right.
I think that's what she does. She is
And
an
it's pretty dang
explorer,
popular. I mean, it's been around for 20 plus years.
right? It might not be quite so popular now. It's more like SpongeBob, but what can I tell you?
Well, if you guys don't know about Happy Days, you know nothing.
Right. For sure. Okay, Robert, you're up.
All right. Our next question is, how can I address cultural stereotypes in youth programs?
That's such an important thing. Stereotypes altogether are important to be able to address them. Um, One of the things that we tend to do as human beings is to categorize people based on something physical that we can see, right? Even though well over 95% of DNA is exactly the same across the entire human spectrum, right? It's a teeny tiny percent of your DNA that makes you you. However, that makes you you in a very unique way, right? Fingerprints and so forth. So I think that what we do is we spend a lot of time teaching kids at an early age how to find patterns and how to categorize things, right? Well, what happens is they learn about patterns and they learn about categorization. And then that's an easy shift if you're being surrounded by people who think in stereotypes, right? To be thinking that way yourself. And so I think that we need to really consider those biases that we have, and we all have them, right? I was thinking the other day, one of my good friends in high school had two daughters. The first daughter was in the NICU unit for 55 days. She weighed 1 pound and 14 ounces when she was born. The second daughter weighed 8.5 pounds when she was born. And yet, when you looked at them as adults and you asked them to, if you would have asked people to put the baby picture with the right adult, their stereotype would have been exactly backwards. The teeny tiny baby ended up being almost 6 feet tall. And the 8.5 pound baby ended up being in shoes, 5'2", right? But there was a stereotype that you have that the size you are when you are born will determine, or you determine that men will always be taller than women. Maybe not, right? We have these stereotypes that build in because we see what we think is normal. And we say, oh, that's normal. But the fact of the matter is, normal is the fact that we all need to eat to survive, that we all need to drink water to survive, that we all need rest to survive. We all need those kinds of things. That's normal. But these stereotypes make it easy for me to say, ooh, you're scary, or ooh, you're wonderful. I'm going to just assume that you're great and you may be the scary one. So I think that it's important that we understand that we have bias, and we've been taught to hate all the people our relatives hate, right? To be concerned about the people our relatives are concerned about, people that we know very little about. And I think we're seeing that a lot in this country right now. If you fit into a certain category, you're either good or evil. And that is so, so very far from the truth. But you're seeing that categorization become a stereotype, which then becomes you're evil or not good, or the reverse, you're perfect. So I yammered on a long time. So Brett, it's your turn. I'll be
Well,
quiet.
I hate to trash talk my wife. Hopefully, she's not listening. But when you said that, right? So she, when she was real young, they had her up in the jury box and they were trying to do jury selection. And so the guy said something like, is he guilty? And my wife looks down at him and she's looking at him and she goes, yeah, he's guilty. And he's like, you can't do that. You can't just look at somebody, and she was real young and whatever. But, you know how we are when we're younger sometimes. We're not the sharpest tool in the shed. No offense to anybody. I'm young too. So just so we're clear on that. But anyway, when you were saying that, I started laughing. And then I think too that, it's kind of like myth busting, right? Like these stereotypes. And I'm guilty of it too. So I used to, thinking that I'm doing this in a positive way when I'm young and dumb. Uh, and so on middle school at the beginning of the year, I would always be searching for what looked like athletic people, right? And we all know that the most unathletic dude in the world could be the most athletic, and vice versa. So it's kind of dumb of me to think like that. But anyway, there was this real tall black kid, and so I go, hey, come here. He was brand new. He's eighth grader. I go, come here. I go, what do you do? He goes, I play hockey. I go, hockey? We don't play hockey in Bakersfield, you knucklehead. I said, you're a basketball player now. I go, where are you from? He goes, I'm from the East Coast, where that's all they did is play hockey. So anyway, I said, well, you're not playing hockey. You do basketball. He goes, all right. Met his mom, great people. Just, I mean, she was top notch, unbelievable. He was a great kid. Well, long story short, I used to get kicked out of the games. I would teach him how to box out. Well, he already knew so well with hockey that he would actually box people into the wall, but legally, like he was just doing great technique. And then they call a foul on him. I'm like, for what? And I get kicked out of the game. Anyway, long story short, he wound up winning the state championship with one of the local high schools in town. So, kind of going back to the parallel of that gal that said, I didn't know I was a dancer, right? So we want to be able to give these guys and gals opportunities at all levels, but we got to watch our own stereotypes and biases, as GMA says. And so I think we want to try to, do myth busting there. Let everybody try it. I don't care if you're 2 foot tall or if you're 9 foot tall. I've seen 9 foot tall people, well, maybe not quite that tall, and they're terrible at basketball. I've seen little, 2 footers that are really good. So, I think we need to get out of our own way and just test it. I say test, not guess, right?
Absolutely. And give people choices and options, right? Rather than making that decision for them. I'm guilty of that.
And sometimes not, right? I said, you're not a hockey player anymore. You're a basketball player. And he goes, okay.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that we just we have to acknowledge that stereotypes exist. And if you are ever walking down the street and you see someone that makes you want to shy away, you're probably functioning on a stereotype, right? And so we all have those beliefs. And I'm not saying that you want to totally disband them, because maybe there are reasons you have those, but by the same token, you have to be open to not judge solely on what you think you're witnessing, right? Just because you see a person that looks a certain way doesn't mean that that's who they are.
Right. You get bit by a dog doesn't mean all dogs are bad, right? You just maybe
That's
got a
right.
bad dog.
That's right. And maybe you deserve to be bit. Yikes. Okay, Robert, you're up.
All right, our next question is how do I create inclusive environment for all cultures?
I think you do that by opening it up. When I was a principal, I had three distinct populations, right? In my classroom or in my school, and they were about they were almost a third, a third, and a third. And the two cultures that I wasn't as familiar with, there was one I was really not familiar with, and that was a Sikh population. And there was a Sikh temple right across the street from my school. And then I also didn't know as much as I do now about Hispanic culture, right? I knew some, but I didn't know enough. And so I made it my business to find the leaders in those communities and talk with them and to discover what was culturally true for them. And so what I noticed was that a lot of my Sikh kids were not eating. They came to the cafeteria, they picked up the food, but they were not eating it. And on some of the dishes, I totally understood, but on others, I didn't. And so I went over and I talked to their leadership at this Sikh temple. And what I learned was that they are taught culturally to not eat anything that was alive, like an animal that was alive or could have become alive. So that would include eggs, right? Now, it was okay, they could have cheese or milk because that didn't cause the animal to die, but it was really interesting. And so we changed the food that we offered to them because what we were offering to them, they would have been, their culture said you can't eat that, right? And so I had to learn that in both cultures because some things are we don't eat, right? We just don't eat that. Now, for me, I don't eat liver, right? That's not a cultural preference, that's a taste preference. But for some cultures, that would be considered a bad thing to eat. And so I think we need to be aware, be observant, watch what's happening. And if there's something you don't understand, you need to go and find somebody who can tell you that. And I will share this as well. What the head person at the Sikh temple told me was this. I said to him, it seems like a lot of you are related. And he said, we're not. Why do you say that? And I said, well, because a lot of you have the same last names. And I said, like Smith or Jones. And he said, like what? And I said, like Singh or Carr. And he said, in our language, Carr means girl and Singh means boy. And he said, I said, well, why do you use that as your last name? He said, because that is your last name. It's not your family name, but it's the name that's used so they know if they're talking about the male or the female. And I thought, how enlightening that was, that simple statement. So I was able to share that with the teachers and they went, oh my gosh, right? And so it's something that's that simple. And yet when you think about it, it makes 100% sense. So I'll just give this as a personal example. Our last name is Zandes, Zandes. And when they came from Greece, they put an R in it, the government, Zanders. And our part of the family took the R out. But there were other parts of the family who left the R in, right? And so we just need to know that can happen because we're not being in tune with a cultural norm or how they do things. So find an expert that can tell you things. I think that's important. And I think that you just you're inclusive of every culture, that every culture is valuable, and you don't just celebrate one, you celebrate them all. So
Yeah, we have some of those things that are built in, cultural holidays. Always celebrate those, and that helps for it to be inclusive. And the way you celebrate that can be multifaceted with the food, or with, somebody coming in from that culture and speaking, and, so on and so forth. But I was laughing my tail off when you were talking about that. So Gma and I were in a very rough place in LA. We won't say exactly where it was at, but the kids were so scared to come to after school because of the gangbangers. And so we'll just say the Reds and the Blues. So we're like, well, okay, we're going to have to go to them and get this figured out. And so we went and we talked to the two head people of the gangs. We said, look, you got to do what you have to do, but can you please not, from this time to this time, the after school time, have any problems? Don't sell drugs, don't fight, don't kill each other, don't do any of that. Are you willing to at least do that? And sure enough, they agreed to it because, in the end, they still wanted to get out themselves, so to speak. And so it gave these kids a chance to be able to do
Mhm.
that. And it really changed the culture of what was going on there. So that's number one. The second one I was thinking about, just a quick story. So we owned a couple stores downtown. We had an antique store and a thrift store because you can see we got collectibles. And so I went. I already knew it was a rough area, and so I already went and I said, "Who runs the streets here?" And his name was Scooby. And so I went and hunted down Scooby. And I said, "Look, Scooby, here's the deal." I said, "I don't want anything stolen from these stores." And I said, "I know you're the man. And so if you're the man and you say nobody steals, nobody will steal. So what do I need to do to make this work out? Because I don't want a big beef with you and I, but they're not going to steal from our stores." And so we worked it out and we gave him a bunch of good deals. And he was a super nice guy, but he's from the
In
street.
charge.
Yeah, he was hardcore, right? So anyway, long story short, we had this one gal come in and we called her Skeletor. We didn't know her name. She was out there. I'll just let you know that. And so she stole something. And so I went, I said, "Scooby, I thought you said nobody." Well, anyway, I was trying to explain who it was. I go, Skeletor. He's like looking around, looking around. He's like, "I don't know Skeletor." I go, "Well, we don't know her name. That's just what we called her because she was whack. She wouldn't talk to us and we'd give her shoes. She just was really wacky." So finally, about, 10 minutes in of the explanation, he goes, "You mean Paula?" And I said, "I don't know, dude. I don't know her name." He goes, "Oh, I'll talk to Paula." Well, we never saw Paula again, needless to say. But, that's kind of a negative example. But in the same breath, you have to go to the leadership at whatever level to try to be able to help the youth. Because if they're a little bit nervous or scared or it's weird or whatever, and we used to also tell our kids, because we worked in a rough area, and we said, "Look, it's like a switch. When you come to the after school program, you can forget about all your problems, all your cultural differences, all of this, right?" But I said, "Make sure when you leave, you turn it back on, because if you're smiling, doing whatever, you were they were going to take advantage of you." So we said to them many times over, make sure that you understand if you're coming or going, because you need to have a little bit of a scowl on your face or they would mess with you out on the streets. But you can just be you and have fun as a kid when you're in here in the after school program. So I know that's a little off the beaten path, but I just wanted to say that being inclusive includes some of those hard conversations.
Yes, it does. And I think that what you talked about at the very end, the culture of your program is accepting. It's a safe place. It's a supportive environment. We're going to have fun here together. And you're right. You may have to go back out where that's not safety, that safety's not there, but at least for those 3 hours, that's where they can come to be a kid. And that's a great gift that you can give young people. A lot of young people are tasked with making adult level decisions for their lives way too early, like at 8 or 9. And so providing that safe and supportive environment is critical. And so for all of you who do that work in expanded learning, or you do that in a club or at the Y or the Boys and Girls Club, wherever you do that work with kids, or maybe it's just as a babysitter, right? However you deal with that, know that creating that safe and supportive environment allows children the privilege of being a child, right? Because it's not nearly as much fun to be an adult as we'd like to think. So, Robert, before we go any further, since we've been yammering here, who's all on tonight?
Yeah, so altogether, we had a total of 18 viewers. So I want to say thank you guys
Okay,
for joining us.
absolutely. We appreciate that. And please don't hesitate to put in a question if you have one, because we'd love to hear from you. So thank you for being. And if you live in the Central Valley of California, it's still over 100 degrees right now. So we really do appreciate it. You've been in the heat all day. If you're in other areas where it's cooler, yay. And I hope that you're not in any area where there is too much rain, too much fire, any of those things that could be keeping you from being safe, because safe is so important. So, Robert, I think we have time for maybe two, maybe three more questions. What's up?
All right, our next question is, how can I integrate cultural awareness into everyday activities?
I think that you do that. I think that the thing you need to avoid is for it to look like you're doing that. I don't know how else to say that. If you say, okay, today we're going to look at differences, or today we're going to right, I think that you're setting them up for being, you're saying they're different, and that's why we're going to do that. So what I think you do is you integrate it. You don't isolate it. You integrate it, and so you can ask kids to tell stories, to tell a story about how you celebrate a holiday, rather than just saying, oh, here's the traditional story and this is what we're telling you. You might start there. You might start by reading The Night Before Christmas, right? Went all through the house. And then you might say, how do you celebrate Christmas Eve or the night before Christmas, that kind of thing. But do it as part of a whole, and it's integrated, rather than trying to just isolate it. That being said, I do think when you talk about bias, I don't know that you can talk about that so much in specifics with the younger kids, but with older kids, I think you can. And that would be something that you would want them to feel comfortable exploring their own bias. And so at that point, you could call that out. But I would celebrate on a regular basis by being inclusive, by asking kids to share their stories, their personal adventures, all of that, and have them share it out, so that other kids can learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot there, right? So I'll talk about sports first. So, when I was teaching PE, right after I taught the special day kids, we were able to integrate that based off the sport, right? And so we did golf, and we would talk about where that would originate, Scotland, or we didn't really do sumo wrestling. They didn't really have sumo suits back then, but we would do with the big old ball, and we would knock people, and it was fun. They'd bounce around. So we would talk about sumo wrestling, right, from Japan, or maybe it was soccer in England. So I think that, the culture awareness and integrating that within each of the sports was really good for them. The other thing, going back to my special day kids, we would take them on a journey, right? And so when you present or you're in sales, we say paint a picture of their future in the close. So, you're saying here are the pain points, blah, blah, blah. You give the whatever to help them, and, how would you help them, and this, that, whatever. And then you paint that picture so that they can see the vision of their future. Well, we used to do that, and we would do, time travels or country travels or different things of that nature to be able to ultimately bring all that together and to integrate the awareness into everyday activities. Well, I mean, if you have a unit on soccer, let's go back to PE, and it's a 4-week unit, you could bring in something new every day with them, or you could have them bring in something new where they have to go and research that for a little bit encyclopedias, not Google or Chat GPT, right? And then they would bring it to them, and they were just so excited to be able to take that journey because our kids, they hadn't even seen the beach for goodness sakes. So we're taking them to Scotland, we're taking them to Japan, we're taking them to whatever. They were just loving it because we tried to get field trips, which was difficult at the time to get to take them to the beach, and so a lot of times we couldn't get them to go that far, so we get to take them to a lake and stuff. But a lot of these kids that lived where they lived, they had never seen all these great things culturally or otherwise, and we didn't have just at the click of the button where you could understand Japanese culture or whatever the case may be. So I think there's a lot of different ways now, activities that you can do on a regular basis that bring in all the different cultural aspects.
I something triggered when you were talking about that and with sports. So culturally, women's basketball is reaching a maturity level, right? I mean, people are embracing it; they want to watch it, and so we see great players like Caitlin Clark and all of this, right? And she is totally capable of playing, great basketball, and yet I will tell you. So this will date me because it's been at least 10,000 years ago. But when I was in high school, boys basketball looked like boys basketball or men's basketball. But girls basketball, you were only allowed to go, if you were a guard, you only got to go to a certain spot on the court. Half court, you had to stop because you weren't supposed to be across the line. And if you were a forward, you had the opposite end, right? And I look back on that and I can remember it was somewhere in my junior or senior year. They said, well, girls could go the whole court. And everybody's going, what? How can that be, right? Because girls aren't supposed to play basketball like boys play basketball. They're supposed to play their version. And so when you think about that, just if that were the only change that had been made, the only change. But if you think about it, there was a time when you would not have seen a man in the grocery store. And now you see them all the time, right? Because culturally things have changed. And so I think we also need to help kids understand that culture is evolving and it's being more accepting. But also, if you feel like you're somehow, like if I felt like staying half court basketball was the only way to play, I would be resentful and biased toward women who played full court, right? Because I hadn't gone through that yet. I hadn't let go of that. So I just think we need to understand that culture is evolving and it's changing. And as cultures interact, there is going to be more and more change because you'll take the good stuff from one and maybe discard part of yours, right? And realize that. So I was just thinking about that just in women's sports, the difference is night and day.
Well, and I hate to correct Gma because she is the doctor, but let's call it like it was. She was the cheerleader. I don't think she played much basketball. But hey, whatever. Maybe I wasn't there. And I think originally it was 2, 2, and 2. I think there were a half a dozen players.
Yep.
Two played defense, two played offense, and two could go both ways. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Crazy.
And that's how soccer started, right? You could, if you were a forward or you were the back player. And I think that we have to realize that that's evolved because what our stereotype of what it looked like, right? This is what it has to look like, has completely changed, right? It's no longer the same thing. And I think that that's true. And you can see that how those changes are being made in sports in particular, but also in astronauts or in engineers or in who stays home with kids, right? All of those things are changing because it makes sense for change to happen. And I think that's one of the things that to value diversity, truly value it and look for it. Somebody who thinks differently than you do on purpose, right? Is really an important aspect of becoming a great citizen of the world.
Yeah, and it drives me. I got to go on a rant now. So I was thinking when you were saying that with the Kevin Costner movie, and there was a bunch of black women who were smarter than any of these white men
Yeah.
scientists, and yet they were, excluding them. And I just can't understand this. Like, who cares whether you're black, green, yellow, whether you come from this culture, that culture, whatever? The cream always rises to the top, and the smartest, answers will rise to the top. And so what? You may not be the smartest in sports, but you might be the smartest in science. You may not be the smartest in this, but you right? And everybody gets the chance to be the smartest or whatever you want to call that. But I just never have understood that, and obviously that's not how I was raised. And I told everybody that we have that 120-hour course. I want to call it my mom because my mom taught me all these things early on. So I didn't have to worry about all this crazy crap that was out there. I didn't know there was civil rights going on when my best friend was black growing up. I just knew when they talked trash to him, I was like, screw you very much. You're not going to talk to my buddy like that. So I think being aware is step one, but just getting rid of all these trash traditions, man, it's sickening to me.
Hmm. They are. Well, and growth, what is it? You either win or you learn. I think that's one of the things that you say, and I really appreciate that. And every opportunity you have to learn and to embrace and to value something different that you've learned for the first time or seen for the first time. I just think that is so important. And if you're going to be a positive role model and mentor and influencer of kids, then I think it's even more important that you embrace and value differences and celebrate them, because I do believe this. If everybody was alike, there's only one person who'd be necessary. Nobody else would be. You wouldn't need anybody else. Just one person. That's it. Okay, Robert, send us a short one.
All right. The last question is gonna be, what strategies help you navigate cultural differences?
We're going to have to do a speed round, Gma.
I know navigation is always hard, and I think awareness is the key. You have to be aware of your situation. You have to be aware of what's surrounding you. You have to be aware of what you're trying to do. You have to be aware of where you want to end up. So I would say that the one of the first things that you need to do to navigate is to be aware. And then the second thing is for you to practice in a safe space so that you're not going to injure yourself, right? So that's what an after school program can do. They can give you an opportunity to navigate safely and try it out so you're good at it. Okay, that's my turn.
I'm gonna go as fast as I can, but Alcoholic Anonymous works for a reason. You start with awareness, and we've developed this cycle or model or whatever you want to call it. That's called patterns of change, and we've talked about it before, but maybe only once or twice. So the first step is always awareness, right? That's the ground floor, and then you have to make a decision from there. Once you're aware, do you want to do something about it? Because you could say, "Hi, I'm an alcoholic. I don't want to do anything about it." So then you go up and you start seeking out knowledge, and then the next one's A. So we go AKA, awareness, knowledge, action, and then we say anybody can get committed or to be able to be committed to something, right? But how long is that, right? Is it 30, 60, 90 days, or is it truly everlasting commitment? Because anybody get riled up for 30, 60, 90 days, but what we want is that to last for in perpetuity, so to speak, whatever those lessons are. So I know we had to go quick on that, but I think that the other thing is you can teach active listening and empathy, and you can use role playing to try to work those things through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you are from a culture, from no matter what culture you're from, know about your own culture and then learn about other cultures and think about things you'd like to borrow from theirs and things you want to share about your own that you wouldn't want to change no matter what. So I think that it's being aware and making good decisions. So thank you so much for coming this evening. We appreciate it. Take care. We hope